My name is Jason. I'm 31, and the day my stepdad kicked me out is one of those days that still plays in my head like a video. I can't stop pausing and rewinding. It didn't start dramatic. I actually woke up thinking it was going to be a normal Saturday. I was sleeping in the old room I grew up in, back at my mom's house after a rough year financially. I remember the way the ceiling fan clicked on every rotation and how the light came through the busted blinds that have been crooked since I was a teenager. I checked my phone, scrolled a bit, saw a couple of emails from job applications, nothing special. I could already hear the muffled sound of the TV from the living room because my stepdad, Mark, always has it way too loud. The hallway smelled like coffee and that cheap bacon he buys in bulk. It felt like every other morning since I moved back, except my chest was tight in that way where you know you're overstaying your welcome, even if no one said it out loud yet. Moving back in with my mom and Mark was supposed to be temporary, like 3 months max. That's what I told them and myself. I'd lost my job when the company downsized, then my car broke down, and I was just drowning in bills. My mom sounded genuinely happy when she said, "Come stay here till you get back on your feet," but Mark was quiet on the call. He's been in my life since I was 13, so not exactly a stranger, but we've never been close. He was always the kind of guy who thought any help you got should come with a lecture attached. I tried to pull my weight, cleaning, buying groceries when I could, doing random Instacart runs with my friend when he let me borrow his car. But you can feel when someone is counting every shower you take and every time you open the fridge. That morning, even before anything happened, I could sense it. The air in that house always felt like it was waiting for me to leave. When I walked into the kitchen, Mark was already at the table in his faded work shirt, even though it was Saturday, scrolling through his phone with his glasses down his nose. The local news was on behind him. My mom was at the stove, stirring scrambled eggs. She smiled at me, but it was that tired smile she's been wearing for years. There was a stack of mail sitting on the counter next to the toaster. I only noticed it because my name was sticking out on one of the envelopes, and it had that official look. Thick paper, my full name printed neatly, and a return address from a law office in the city. I grabbed it without thinking much, just assuming it was something about my old student loans or maybe some random legal spam. Mark side-eyed me, watching, like even opening my own mail was suspicious. "You gonna eat or just stand there?" he said, not joking. I didn't answer. I just took the envelope and sat down at the corner of the table with it. I don't know why, but my hands started shaking a little before I even opened it. Maybe because the name of the law firm felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a few pages stapled together, the kind of thing you immediately know you should read carefully. My mom glanced over her shoulder and asked, "Everything okay?" In that casual tone that really means, "Is there another problem I'm going to have to worry about?" I started reading, and the first sentence basically punched me in the face. It was about my grandfather, my dad's dad. He passed away a few years ago, and we weren't super close near the end because of distance and family drama, but I always knew he cared about me. The letter was from the attorney handling remaining estate matters and mentioned a property that had been designated for the benefit of Jason Miller. The address they listed was my mom's house, the house we were standing in, the house I had grown up in and that I was now basically squatting in as a broke 31-year-old. At first I thought I was reading it wrong. I reread the paragraph like 5 times. The letter said my grandfather had helped buy this place when I was a kid, and that his original intention was that the house would eventually be signed over to me upon reaching adulthood or completing higher education, depending on family circumstances. I remember those exact phrases because they burned into my brain. There was also a note saying there had been delays and complications finalizing the transfer because of changes made to the mortgage and title over the last few years. They wanted to schedule a call with me to clarify my side. My side? I didn't even know there was a situation to have a side in. My mom had gone quiet. Mark wasn't pretending not to watch anymore. He was staring straight at me, eyebrows tight, jaw clenched. The TV suddenly felt too loud. The pan on the stove started hissing, and it honestly felt like the whole kitchen shrunk a little. That's the exact moment I realized this wasn't just some random letter. This was something they knew about, and they hadn't told me. The moment I looked up from the letter, my mom was frozen with the spatula still in her hand, like she couldn't decide whether to keep cooking or drop everything and walk out of the kitchen. Mark didn't hide anything. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and gave me this look like, "Finally, it's out." I could feel something snapping inside me, like this quiet, slow-burning fuse I didn't even realize had been lit for years. I kept reading the papers even though my eyes were already blurring, flipping through the pages, trying to understand how the hell a house I supposedly had some claim to had somehow turned into their house. The house Mark always bragged about paying off early. I remembered bits and pieces from when I was a kid, my grandfather visiting, him and my mom whispering in the garage, arguments between her and my dad that always ended with doors slamming and me pretending not to hear. I hadn't thought about any of that in years because I assumed it didn't matter. But suddenly it all felt huge and connected, like I had been walking around missing the last page of a book everyone else already read. My mom finally put the spatula down and turned off the stove. I didn't even realize breakfast was burning until she scraped the pan into the sink without saying a word. That silence hit harder than any shouting ever could. Before I could even ask anything, Mark stood up and grabbed his coffee mug. But instead of drinking from it, he slammed it down on the counter so hard some of it splashed out. "Well," he said, wiping his hand on his shirt, "I guess you finally know." Just like that. No explanation, no apology, no attempt to soften it. My mom shot him this panicked look, like she wanted him to shut up, but he didn't care. He kept going, saying stuff like, "We knew this would come back eventually, and it's not as simple as it looks on paper, and your grandfather didn't understand how things really were at the time." He was talking at me, not to me, pacing around like the house was shrinking with every step he took. I kept staring at the papers in front of me, especially the part about unauthorized refinancing changes. I didn't even know what the hell that meant, but I knew it wasn't good. My mom tried to calm the situation, telling him to stop, but Mark was already in that mode. He gets into where he acts like he's the only adult in the room. I could feel anger bubbling up in me, but underneath that, something worse. This weird betrayal that didn't fully make sense yet, but felt real. When my mom finally spoke, her voice cracked in that way that made me instantly feel like a kid again. She said something like, "Jason, it wasn't supposed to be like this," which didn't explain anything but made everything 100 times heavier. She sat down across from me and started rubbing her forehead like she had a migraine coming on. She wouldn't look at me directly, but she kept glancing between me and the papers like she wished they would disappear if she stared long enough. She said the house had gotten complicated after my dad left, that money was tight, that my grandfather had helped out in ways we didn't fully understand at the time. She kept using these vague phrases that didn't actually clarify anything. I asked her flat out, "Did you know the house was supposed to be mine?" And she winced like I had slapped her. Before she could answer, Mark jumped in again, saying, "Your grandfather didn't get to decide everything. We had to make choices." Every word out of his mouth made my blood pressure spike. My mom whispered, "Mark, stop," but he ignored her completely. He kept talking like he was explaining taxes to a toddler, telling me I shouldn't get any ideas, and that what's done is done. I could feel myself shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that something massive had been kept from me for years. I asked them how long they had known. My voice cracked, and it pissed me off that they could hear it. My mom finally admitted that the attorney had contacted her months ago. Months, and she didn't tell me because she didn't want to stress me out while I was already in a rough spot. She said she wanted to figure things out first, whatever that meant. But Mark didn't even try to hide the truth. He said, "We didn't tell you because it doesn't matter. This house is ours, not yours. Your grandfather didn't understand that we were the ones paying the bills." Something about the way he said, "ours," hit me in a place I didn't even know could hurt. I felt this wave of nausea roll through me. I stood up because I couldn't sit anymore. I walked toward the hallway just to get air, but Mark stepped in front of me like he thought I was going to run around the house ripping the walls apart or something. He pointed toward the front door and said, "If you're going to start trouble, you can leave now." I laughed, actually laughed, because I thought he had to be joking. But he wasn't. His face was stone cold. He repeated it, "Get out." Just like that. Like I was some stranger causing a scene in a grocery store. At first my mom protested. She kept saying, "Mark, stop. He has nowhere to go." But Mark didn't care. He said I was an adult and that maybe this will motivate you to figure your life out. He said it like he was doing me some huge favor. My mom tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away from her like she was annoying him. He told me I had 30 minutes to pack my stuff, and if I didn't, he'd put my things outside himself. I remember my face going completely numb. I felt like I was floating or watching from outside my body. I walked back to my room with the papers in my hand because I didn't know what else to do. My mind was racing between anger, panic, confusion, and this hollow feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. I stuffed whatever I could into my backpack, some clothes, my laptop, chargers, the letters. I didn't even take everything. I just grabbed enough to not feel naked. When I came back to the living room, Mark was standing by the door like a bouncer. My mom was crying quietly near the kitchen sink, wiping her face with her sleeve. I stood there for a second, holding my bag, waiting for someone to blink first or say something human. No one did. Mark opened the door and said, "Time's up." The second I stepped outside, the cold air hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't even that cold of a day, but everything felt sharper, louder, more real the moment the door shut behind me. The sound of the lock clicking was the part that really messed me up. I just stood there on the porch, holding my backpack like a kid waiting for a ride after school, except there was no ride and no plan. My mom didn't follow me outside. I kept half expecting her to run after me or call my name or at least open the blinds and look out, but nothing happened. It was like the house swallowed her and Mark didn't even bother pretending to care. I walked to the edge of the driveway because standing still felt wrong. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have a car. I didn't have enough money for an Uber across town, let alone somewhere to stay. I sat on the curb with the papers in my hand, reading everything again, hoping I had misunderstood something. But every sentence hit the same. My grandfather had meant for me to have something. This house, of all things, and somehow that had gotten twisted into something my mom and Mark had taken over. The more I read it, the more the whole morning felt unreal, like I was reading someone else's mess. But the bruised feeling in my chest reminded me it was mine. I must have sat there for at least 20 minutes before I finally texted my friend Gabe. He's the kind of guy who doesn't ask questions right away, just shows up. When I told him I needed a ride and didn't know where else to go, he replied, "Be there in 10. I shoved the papers back into my bag and kept pacing up and down the sidewalk, trying not to look at the house behind me. Every time I glanced at it, I felt this mix of anger and embarrassment. Anger because of everything I had just learned, and embarrassment because I was 31 years old standing outside my childhood home with a backpack, like someone who got kicked out for sneaking a girl in or failing a class. Not for asking basic questions about something that literally involved me. I kept replaying the moment Mark said, "Get out," over and over. The way he didn't hesitate. The way my mom didn't stop him. The way the whole thing unfolded so fast it left no room for me to even react. I touched my pocket to feel my phone because some irrational part of me thought maybe my mom would call. But she didn't. When Gabe's car pulled up, he gave me that look. The kind friends give when they know something is seriously wrong but don't want to push too far. I got in the car, shut the door, and the first thing he asked was, "You good?" I couldn't even answer at first. I just shook my head. He didn't ask anything else while he pulled out of the neighborhood, and I was grateful for that silence. At one point I looked back through the rear window and saw the house getting smaller. The same house where I had taken my first steps, had birthday parties, learned how to ride a bike in the driveway. And now it was the house I had been kicked out of like some stranger. I kept wondering if my grandfather had any idea how his intentions had ended up. And if he didn't, would he be pissed? Would he be disappointed? Would he blame me or them? It made me realize how little I really knew about what happened between him, my dad, and my mom back then. Things I never asked because I assumed the adults had everything handled. Turns out, I was wrong. Gabe drove me to his apartment and told me I could crash on his couch for a while. His place was small, a studio over a laundromat that always smelled faintly like dryer sheets and old socks. But honestly, it felt like a luxury hotel after what just happened. I dropped my bag on the floor and finally told him everything. The letter, the house, the refinancing stuff, Mark kicking me out. He didn't interrupt, didn't question, didn't make me feel like I was crazy. He just listened. When I finished, he let out this long breath and said something like, "Dude, that's messed up." And hearing someone else say it made it feel more real. I pulled the papers out again and spread them across his small coffee table. We started going through every page together like we were detectives. A lot of the legal language went over my head, but even Gabe could tell there were things in there that didn't add up. Dates that didn't match, signatures that didn't line up with what my mom had told me over the years, references to modifications I had never heard of. I felt like I was peeling back layers of something rotten. Later that night, after Gabe fell asleep, I stayed awake staring at the ceiling with the documents on my chest. It was like my brain wouldn't shut off. I kept going over all the times my mom had brushed off money questions, all the arguments she and Mark had behind closed doors, all the times he talked about his house, like he built it brick by brick. I remembered my grandfather giving me weird envelopes as a kid, telling me to save this for later, and my mom always taking them from me before I could open them. Back then I thought it was because she didn't want me losing the money or spending it on junk. Now I wasn't so sure. There were too many pieces that suddenly looked suspicious once I put them together. I felt sick. I didn't know whether to be angry at her, at Mark, at myself, or at the fact that I had no idea how deep this went. And the worst part was this nagging question I couldn't shake. If I hadn't gotten that letter, would they ever have told me? Or would I have lived in that house for months, maybe years, never knowing anything was supposed to be mine? The next morning, I woke up on Gabe's couch with my neck hurting and the papers still on my chest like I had fallen asleep mid-thought. Sunlight was coming through the blinds in that thin, annoying way that hits you right in the eyes. I sat up slowly, feeling that mix of exhaustion and adrenaline that comes after a day where everything collapses at once. For a second I forgot where I was, and when I looked around the apartment, his tiny kitchen, the pile of laundry in the corner, the hum of the laundromat downstairs, it all came rushing back. I checked my phone again. No calls. No texts. Not even from my mom. I don't know why I expected anything, but some part of me thought she'd reach out with at least a "Are you okay?" Nothing. Just silence. That hurt more than the actual kicking out part. Gabe was still asleep, snoring lightly, so I got up quietly, grabbed the papers, and sat by the small window. I felt like if I stared at them long enough, they'd magically rearrange and start making sense. But all I saw were dates and signatures and phrases that felt like someone rewriting history without my permission. At some point, I realized I needed answers from someone who wasn't emotionally tied to this mess. So I called the number on the letter, the attorney handling my grandfather's estate. I expected to get a receptionist or voicemail, but the attorney himself picked up after a few rings. His voice was calm, too calm, like someone who deals with disaster every day. I told him who I was, gave him the file number, and he immediately said, "We've been trying to reach your mother for months." That sentence alone made my stomach twist. He asked if I was aware of the complications involving the title, and when I told him I wasn't, he politely asked if I could talk freely. I glanced around Gabe's apartment and said yes. Then he told me something that basically confirmed my worst fear. Changes had been made to the house title and mortgage years ago that shouldn't have been possible without my signature or my explicit consent, since I was listed as a beneficiary from the beginning. I just sat there, gripping the phone. I didn't interrupt. I didn't breathe. I just listened. He said there might have been miscommunications or unauthorized alterations, but he didn't want to say more without documents in front of him. He asked me to come in the following week. I agreed before I even processed it. When I hung up, I felt like the room tilted a little. I kept replaying his exact words in my head. Shouldn't have been possible without your signature. I had never signed anything. I had never been told anything. For a moment, I felt almost outside myself, like I was watching some other version of me unravel all this while I hovered above like a frustrated ghost. I started thinking about every year I watched my mom and Mark renovate something in the house, brag about paying things off, talk about equity as if the house had always been theirs from the start. I thought about the time they remodeled the kitchen and how Mark acted like he personally built the cabinets with his bare hands. Everything suddenly felt tainted, like I had spent years living in the middle of a lie I didn't know existed. When Gabe finally woke up, he found me sitting at the table staring at nothing. He asked if I wanted breakfast, but the idea of eating anything made my stomach turn. So I just told him, "There's more. It's worse." And when I explained what the attorney said, even he looked stunned for a second before saying, "Dude, Jason, that's serious." After a couple of hours of sitting in silence, trying to sort my thoughts, I realized I needed to talk to my mom. Not Mark, my mom. I sent her a simple text. "Can we talk?" Nothing dramatic, nothing hostile. Just that. She didn't reply. I waited. Then I called. Straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. It felt intentional. And the longer the silence stretched, the angrier I got. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't demanding the house back. I just wanted to know why. Why lie? Why keep it from me? Why let Mark kick me out like trash when the whole situation involved me more than either of them? By late afternoon, I was pacing around Gabe's apartment so much he told me to take a walk. I didn't want to, but I ended up going outside and just walking down the street, turning corners without paying attention to where I was going. My phone never buzzed. Not once. Not until almost 8 p.m., when I finally got a text from my mom. It said, "We need space. Please don't come back right now." That was it. No explanation. No apology. No attempt at clarity. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I felt like if I typed anything, it would either be something I regretted later or something that made everything even worse. I walked back to Gabe's place with this sinking feeling in my gut, like my entire family had just quietly shut the door on me and turned off the lights. When I went inside, Gabe could tell something was wrong even before I showed him the text. He looked at my phone, shook his head, and started pulling blankets out for me without saying anything. That was the moment the weight of all of it hit me. Hard. I wasn't just kicked out. I wasn't just lied to. I wasn't just left in the dark. I was cut out entirely. And for the first time since everything happened, I realized there was a very real possibility that I might never get the full truth. Maybe my mom was scared. Maybe she was guilty. Maybe she was trapped in whatever mess she and Mark created. Or maybe she just didn't want to face me because the truth was worse than I imagined. I lay down on the couch that night and stared at the ceiling until the shapes in the shadows stopped looking like anything familiar. Over the next few days, everything felt oddly quiet, like the world had lowered its volume but turned up the pressure in my chest. I kept checking my phone out of habit, even though I knew my mom wasn't going to reach out. Every time I saw the empty notification screen, it was like a small punch to the gut. I spent most of my time sitting on Gabe's floor with the estate documents spread out around me, trying to piece everything together like some kind of conspiracy board without the pins and string. I wasn't trying to take the house away from anyone. I just wanted to understand why something meant for me had been buried for so long. And the more I looked at those papers, the more it felt like my childhood had been rewritten without me noticing. The house had always felt like home, even with all the tension and arguments growing up. But now it felt like the backdrop to a story I didn't know I was part of, a story where I was the only one who didn't know the ending. A couple of times I almost drove back to the house with Gabe's car just to confront them face to face. But every time I got close to grabbing the keys, something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe anger, maybe both. I didn't know if Mark would slam the door on my face or if my mom would just stand behind him, too scared or embarrassed to speak. I didn't know if going there would make things worse or blow everything open. I didn't know if there were more secrets buried under that roof. Some nights, lying on the couch, I'd remember little things, like how my mom always tensed up when mail arrived, or how Mark insisted on handling house business, or how they shut down every conversation I tried to start about long-term plans. Suddenly, all those moments had new meaning. They weren't random. They weren't normal. They were pieces of something they had been trying to hide for years. And the worst part was that I couldn't tell if my mom was protecting me or protecting herself. When the appointment with the attorney finally came, I showed up early because I couldn't sit still. The office was quiet, with those fake plants nobody waters and shelves full of books nobody reads. He greeted me politely, asked me to sit, and pulled out a folder with my name on it. We went through the documents one by one. He showed me parts of the original agreement my grandfather set up. He showed me signatures that were supposed to be mine but weren't. He showed me dates where decisions were made when I was still a minor. He kept his tone calm and factual, but every page felt like another hit. At one point he said, "You may have grounds to contest parts of this." And I felt this strange mix of validation and dread. Because even if I could fight it legally, who was I actually fighting? My own mother? The man she chose? The version of my family I thought I had? I left the office with a stack of copies and a heaviness in my chest that didn't lift, not even a little. When I walked outside, I expected to feel some kind of relief or clarity or direction. Instead, I just stood on the sidewalk, staring at the papers like they were written in a language I didn't know anymore. Cars passed. People walked by. Nobody knew what I was holding or what it meant. I didn't call my mom. I didn't call Mark. I didn't even call Gabe right away. I just stood there, letting the wind flap the edge of the envelope against my hand. It hit me all at once that I had reached a point where the next step was mine alone. No matter what I chose, something was going to break permanently. Either the truth, or the relationship, or the whole damn foundation of what I thought family was. And the strangest part was that I didn't feel anger in that moment. I didn't feel panic. I just felt this cold, quiet realization that nothing was ever going to be the same again. Not for me. Not for them. Not for that house. And here's the part one still can't explain. That night, when I got back to Gabe's place, I opened the envelope again to reread one of the pages, and it was gone. Not the envelope. Not all the documents. Just one page, the one with the signature that wasn't mine. I tore through my backpack, checked the car, checked the sidewalk outside the attorney's office. Nothing. I swear I had it. I held it in my hand. I saw it. And yet it was gone, like it had never been there in the first place. Gabe thought maybe I dropped it somewhere, or it got stuck to another page, or I misplaced it. But I know I didn't. I checked a dozen times. And to this day, I don't know what happened to that page, or whether it even matters, or if someone took it, or if I just lost my mind for a second. All I know is that after that night, the whole situation just stopped moving. No more letters. No calls. No updates. My mom never reached out again. Mark never said a word. And the house, the one that was supposed to be mine, just faded into the background of my life like a place I once passed through. I still don't understand what really happened. I don't think I ever will. But that was the day my stepdad kicked me out, and the day everything came to the surface, only to disappear just as fast.